The refugee station on the edge of space was crowded, noisy, and full of restless energy. The smell of metal, sweat, and cheap food hung in the air. Humans and aliens stood in long lines that stretched through the corridors, each one waiting for their turn to get a small share of rations. The lights above flickered, and the hum of broken machinery echoed like an old heartbeat. People whispered, argued, or simply stared at the floor, trying to ignore the hopelessness that lived in their bones. Among them was a man named Will. He had been traveling for months, working odd jobs on different colonies, never really staying in one place. Life had been heavy on his shoulders, and he carried it in silence. He stood in the food line without much thought, waiting with no real hunger in his belly. For him, the line was routine: stand, wait, collect, survive. But that evening was different. A small voice cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like a spark inside the dark. Will looked down and saw her, a little alien girl. Her skin was pale silver with faint patterns like starlight running across her cheeks. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly in the dim light, full of innocence but also carrying something older, something broken. She looked directly at him and smiled, though her smile was thin and shaky. "Please marry my mom, human," the girl said. The words froze Will in place. For a moment, he thought he had misheard her. The people around them also went silent, their ears catching the strange request. Then came the laughter, low at first, then spreading like wildfire through the line. Aliens chuckled, humans smirked, someone muttered, "Crazy kid," while another added, "She must be desperate." But the girl kept her eyes locked on Will, her small hands clutching a piece of dry bread like it was treasure. Will's mouth opened, but no words came out. The request was absurd, almost unreal, yet the seriousness in her voice cut through the mockery around them. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him, waiting to see if he would laugh too, or walk away. But something inside his chest tightened. He had seen desperation before, but this was different. This was hope dressed as courage. The girl tilted her head and spoke again, her voice softer this time, almost pleading. "My mom is kind. She takes care of me. But no one helps us now. They don't trust us." Her silver eyes shone as if wet with tears, though none fell. Will knelt down slowly, ignoring the laughter echoing around them. He asked her quietly, "Why me?" The girl didn't hesitate. She answered with the simplicity only a child could carry. "Because you are human, and humans are not afraid." Will felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He wanted to deny it, to say he was just another wanderer trying to survive. But her gaze didn't allow him that escape. Behind her smile was fear, behind her request was danger. And deep inside her young eyes was a secret she couldn't explain yet. The line moved forward, the crowd restless again, but the moment hung heavy in the air. Will realized people were still watching, curious to see if he would push the girl away. Instead, he placed his hand gently on her shoulder. He didn't agree, didn't promise, but he also didn't walk away. And that was enough for the girl to keep smiling, even in the noise of laughter. A shadow fell across them then, tall and graceful. The crowd grew quiet again as a woman stepped forward. Her clothes were torn, her skin marked with the harshness of survival. This was the girl's mother, and though her face carried exhaustion, her eyes carried dignity. She bowed her head slightly to Will, as if apologizing for her daughter's boldness. But Will noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned the crowd with caution. This was not just a family asking for kindness. This was a family fighting against something unseen. The girl clung to Will's sleeve, refusing to let go. The mother whispered something in her own alien tongue, trying to pull her away. But the girl shook her head stubbornly, still staring at Will with hope. And in that strange, fragile moment, Will understood one thing. This was not about love, not yet. This was about survival. And he had just stepped into a story much larger than himself. The crowd at the refugee station did not forget the strange request. Even as the food line shuffled forward, whispers followed Will like shadows. Everywhere he looked, eyes watched him, some with laughter, some with pity, and some with cold suspicion. The alien girl stayed close, her hand still gripping his sleeve as if letting go meant losing her only chance. Her mother walked beside them now, silent, her face unreadable. She kept her head bowed, but Will could feel the quiet strength in the way she carried herself. It was the strength of someone who had endured too much for too long. They reached the counter where rations were handed out. The worker glanced at them with irritation and handed Will his share. When the alien girl reached forward, the worker's eyes narrowed. "Only registered families get double portions," he said sharply, pulling the tray back. The girl's small shoulders slumped, but before she could speak, her mother placed a hand on her arm. "Enough, Lyra," the mother whispered softly, her voice carrying a mix of love and warning. The girl lowered her eyes, but her grip on Will's sleeve tightened, refusing to let go. The crowd laughed again, this time louder. "See? Even food lines know who belongs and who doesn't," someone sneered. "Marry her, human, then maybe she'll eat," another voice mocked. Will's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He guided the girl and her mother away from the line, carrying his small portion of food. Once they found a quiet corner of the station, away from the noise, he turned to them. "All right," Will said, keeping his voice steady. "I need to know why. Why me? Why ask something like that in front of everyone?" The girl, Lyra, looked up, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Because you are human," she repeated simply, "and because they will not take you away from us." Her words sent a shiver through him. "Who will not take you?" he asked carefully, his voice lowering. Lyra looked at her mother, who finally raised her head. Her eyes, though tired, burned with quiet fire. "They are hunting us," the mother said, her voice low but firm. She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "There are traders here, slavers who deal in refugees. They wait for those with no protection, no family. They mark them as unclaimed. Then they disappear." Will felt his stomach twist. He had heard rumors before, whispers about black markets and hidden ships, but seeing the fear in her eyes made it real. Lyra's mother continued, "If you stand with us, they cannot touch us, even the cruel respect human bonds. It is a shield." The girl tugged his sleeve again, her voice trembling but full of hope. "My mom is strong, but they will take her. They will take me. Please, if you say yes, they cannot." Her words were not the silly dream of a child anymore. They were survival carved into innocence. Will ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He was only a wanderer, a man with no ties, no purpose beyond drifting through broken colonies. And yet here was a child asking him to become a wall between her family and the darkness waiting in the shadows. The mother's voice broke his thoughts. "I did not ask her to do this," she said quietly, almost ashamed. She is too young to understand the weight of her words, but she understands fear, and she understands loss. She has lost too much already. Her voice trembled, but she stood tall, unwilling to beg. She looked at Will directly now, her eyes sharp. "If you walk away, I will not blame you. But if you stay, you must know, this is not only about kindness, it is about danger." Silence hung between them, broken only by the low hum of the station. Will looked at the girl, her small face glowing with desperate hope. Then he looked at her mother, standing proud despite exhaustion. He realized then that saying yes was not just a choice, it was a chain, one that could bind his life to theirs forever. But walking away, he knew he would carry those silver eyes with him no matter where he went. Lyra leaned closer, her voice soft, trembling, but filled with courage. "You asked why you, I will tell you, because you looked at me and did not laugh." The words pierced deeper than he expected. He remembered the crowd's cruel laughter, the mocking voices, the way no one else cared. And suddenly he understood. Sometimes the smallest act of humanity could become the brightest light in someone else's darkness. Will let out a long breath, his heart heavy but steady. He didn't give her an answer yet, but he didn't walk away either. The girl smiled again, weak but filled with trust. And the mother watched him with cautious eyes, as if waiting to see if this human was truly different. In the shadows of the station, unseen eyes followed them, cold and patient. And though Will did not yet know it, his choice was already pulling him into a storm he could not escape. He wanted it or not. And in the shadows outside, unseen figures marked their hiding place, waiting for the moment to strike. The false night on the station stretched long, but Will could not sleep. He sat against the cold wall of the small shelter, listening to the slow breaths of Lyra as she slept curled beside her mother. Saris rested with one arm draped protectively around her daughter, her eyes half closed but never fully at peace. It was clear to Will that she had learned to live on the edge of fear, never trusting safety for too long. The shadows of the station seemed alive, whispering of dangers that lingered just beyond sight. Will thought of the words he had heard earlier in the food line. The mocking laughter, the sharp hiss of unclaimed, and the cruel smirks of those who looked at Saris and her daughter like they were prey. Now he understood the meaning more clearly. Unclaimed meant weak, unprotected, and for many here it meant marked for the traders who dealt in flesh and fear. He had heard rumors of slavers who slipped through refugee stations like wolves in the dark. They looked for those who had no families, no allies, no one who would notice their absence. And once taken, those people were never seen again. A sound broke his thoughts, footsteps, faint but steady, echoing in the narrow corridor outside. Will tensed, his hand tightening around the small utility knife he carried. It was no weapon of war, but it was something. The steps paused near their hiding place. Then a low voice murmured in an alien tongue. He could not understand the words, but he caught the tone, amusement mixed with hunger. Saris's eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling him to stay quiet. The voices lingered for a while, then drifted away, their laughter fading into the hum of the station. Only when silence returned did Saris relax slightly, though the tension in her body remained. "They know we are here," she whispered, her voice low and steady. "They are watching, waiting for a moment when they can strike." Will frowned. "Then we move, find somewhere safer." But Saris shook her head, her expression grim. "There is no safe place here, not for us, not unless we are claimed." The words cut deep into Will's thoughts. He realized that Lyra's strange request had not been a child's wild idea. It had been a shield, a desperate attempt to place her mother under human protection. In this twisted place, even slavers respected certain bonds. A human's claim meant risk, it meant conflict, and traders did not like conflict. By asking him to marry her mother, the girl had not asked for romance, she had asked for survival. And now the choice pressed on him harder than ever. Will looked at Saris, her face half hidden in the flickering light. Her beauty was not soft but carved from hardship, her dignity still standing even after so much loss. He saw in her the quiet strength of someone who refused to break, even when the world tried to crush her. And he saw the fear she tried to hide, the fear that her daughter would be taken if she faltered even once. "Why me?" Will asked again, his voice heavy with doubt. "Why trust me, a wanderer, a man with nothing?" Saris held his gaze, her eyes calm but firm. "Because nothing is still more than what we have, because sometimes nothing is the only thing that stands in the way of darkness." The weight of her words struck him. He thought of the laughter of the crowd, the cruel indifference of those who had watched without care. He thought of Lyra's silver eyes shining with hope, and the way her small hand had clung to his sleeve. And he realized that walking away would not only mean abandoning them, it would mean abandoning himself. Still, the risk gnawed at him. If he stood with them, he would also become a target, hunted like them. For the first time in years, Will found himself caught between his instinct to run and his desire to stay. The station around them groaned with old machinery, the hum of ships docking and leaving echoing through the walls. In the distance, alarms sounded briefly, then faded. The refugee station was alive, but it was not safe. Every corner held secrets, every shadow held threats, and Will now walked directly into the center of them. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of decision pressing down. If he chose to stand with Saris and Lyra, there would be no turning back. And somewhere in the dark, unseen eyes waited, patient and cruel. For the hunters of the unclaimed had already marked their prey. The station's lights dimmed as the cycle shifted to false night, but the corridors never truly slept. Merchants shouted in a dozen languages, guards patrolled with bored faces, and somewhere deep in the shadows, deals were made that never reached the official records. Will walked with the alien girl and her mother through the maze of narrow halls, carrying his small share of rations. Every step felt heavier than before, as if unseen eyes were pressing on his back. He had not agreed to anything yet, but already he felt like he had stepped into a story with no way out. The girl, Lyra, walked close to his side, her small hand never leaving his sleeve. Her mother moved on the other side, tall and graceful despite the marks of exhaustion. Her silver-tinted skin shimmered faintly under the flickering lights, and her long dark hair was tied back with a strip of cloth. Even in her weariness, she carried herself like someone who had once known respect, once walked proudly. But the way she avoided the gaze of others told Will that those days were long gone. Finally, they stopped in a quiet corner near a broken ventilation pipe. Steam hissed softly from the wall, masking their voices. The mother turned to Will and studied him for a long moment, her eyes sharp and searching. "You must forgive my daughter," she said, her voice calm but firm. "She does not understand the weight of what she asked." Will wanted to reply, but Lyra spoke first, her voice stubborn. "I understand enough, Mother. I know what happens to the unclaimed." Her mother's eyes softened at the child's words, a flash of pain crossing her face. But she stayed silent, as if silence itself was easier than truth. Will finally asked, "What is your name?" The woman hesitated, then answered, "Scarce." The name was soft, almost like music, though her tone carried iron beneath it. Scarce glanced at Lyra, then back at Will. "She should not have asked you this, human, but she is afraid, and fear makes children bold." Will leaned against the wall, his mind restless. "I still don't understand," he admitted. "Why me? Why would your daughter trust a stranger with something so heavy?" Scarce's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, not of joy, but of sadness. "Because you listened, and because you did not laugh," she said, echoing Lyra's earlier words. "She sees kindness as strength, and strength as protection." Her eyes hardened as she continued. "But protection comes at a cost, and I cannot ask you to carry it." Before Will could respond, a group of rough-looking aliens passed nearby, their eyes scanning the shadows. One of them slowed, spotting Scarce and Lyra. A smirk spread across his face, sharp teeth glinting under the lights. "Unclaimed," he muttered in his own tongue, but the meaning was clear. Scarce tensed, pulling Lyra behind her, while Will straightened, his instincts sharp. The group lingered only a moment before moving on, but their laughter echoed like a warning. Scarce's face darkened. "Do you see now, human? This is what follows us." Lyra pressed closer to Will, whispering, "They will come back. They always come back." Will felt anger stir inside him. Anger at the cruelty, at the way fear had carved itself into the girl's voice. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but Scarce's steady gaze stopped him. She did not want pity, she wanted truth. So he said instead, "Then they'll have to get through me first." Scarce studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if testing the weight of his words. For the first time, a flicker of respect lit her tired face. They moved again, this time toward the small shelter Scarce and Lyra called home. It was little more than a hidden space carved behind stacks of abandoned crates. The floor was cold metal, covered with scraps of cloth and a single thin blanket. A dim light flickered above, casting everything in shadows. Will looked around, realizing just how fragile their lives were. No doors, no locks, only hiding and hoping. He set his rations down, though he knew it would barely help. Scarce lowered herself to sit, her movements graceful despite exhaustion. She looked at Will with quiet seriousness. "You must decide, human, will you walk away tonight, or will you stand with us, knowing what follows?" The weight of her words pressed on him, heavier than any burden he had carried before. Lyra's small voice broke the silence. "Please, don't leave us. You are not like the others. I can see it." Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the half-light, filled with fragile hope. Will sat across from them, his heart torn, his mind restless. He had no answers yet, only the knowledge that walking away would haunt him forever. In the silence that followed, the hum of the station felt louder than ever. Somewhere far away, a ship engine roared, and the ground trembled faintly. Scarce watched him, Lyra clung to him, and Will realized that he was no longer just a wanderer. He was now part of their fragile world, weather. The false dawn of the station began with a low hum in the walls. Lights flickered back to life, pale and cold, casting long shadows across the narrow halls. Merchants shouted again, engines rumbled, and life returned as if the night's dangers had never happened. But Will could still feel the memory of the footsteps, the whispers outside their hiding place. He knew those hunters had not left, they were only waiting. Scarce prepared what little food they had, breaking the dry ration into 3 pieces. She gave the largest to Lyra, the smallest to herself, and pushed the last piece toward Will. Her eyes said nothing, but her actions spoke clearly. Even in her fear, she shared. Will took the food silently, though his chest tightened with unease. He had survived many years alone, drifting between colonies, carrying nothing and owing nothing. But this was different. Now there were eyes depending on him. Lyra ate quickly, then leaned against Will's arm with a small sigh. Her voice was soft but steady. They will come again. I know it. They always come back. But if you stay, they won't. Will looked down at her, at the innocence still fighting to survive inside her small body. He wanted to deny her words, to say she was only a child, but he couldn't, because she was right. The hunters would return, and if he walked away, Saris and Lyra would vanish into the dark markets of the galaxy. Saris watched them, her expression calm but heavy with unspoken fear. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. You do not owe us anything. Human, if you leave now, you can forget this place, forget us. Her eyes held his firmly, challenging him, as if daring him to prove her wrong. But if you stay, if you choose us, you will be marked as well. The hunters will turn their eyes on you. Will felt the weight of her words like chains around his chest. Walking away was freedom, staying was danger. But leaving would make him no better than the laughing crowd. He remembered Lyra's first words to him, her smile trembling but bright. Please marry my mom, human. At first, he had thought it was only desperation, a child's wild idea. But now he understood it was a shield, a fragile wall between them and the darkness. Not marriage of love, but marriage of survival. And in this place, survival meant everything. Will stood slowly, his heart pounding with the weight of the choice. Saris rose too, her tall figure tense, ready for his answer. Lyra looked up at him with wide silver eyes, clutching his sleeve once again. Will's voice came out steady, though his hands trembled slightly. I don't have much to give. I don't even know what tomorrow brings for me. But I know one thing. I won't walk away, not from you, not from her. Lyra gasped, her face lighting with hope, while Saris froze, her eyes narrowing as if measuring his resolve. You do not understand what this means, Saris said firmly, her voice sharp. This is not words spoken to comfort a child. This is a bond, and once made, it will not break easily. Will met her gaze without flinching. I know enough to see what happens if I say nothing, enough to know I cannot live with that. The silence stretched between them, heavy and long. Finally, Saris lowered her eyes, her shoulders trembling with something between relief and sorrow. Lyra threw her arms around Will, her voice bright with joy. I knew it. I knew you would say yes. But joy did not last long. Outside their shelter, heavy boots echoed against the metal floor. Voices barked orders in alien tongues, and the sound of weapons being loaded filled the air. Saris stiffened instantly, her hand reaching for Lyra, pulling her close. Will stepped forward, his knife small but gripped tightly, his heart pounding like a war drum. The hunters had come, faster than he expected. Their patience was over. They would not wait for night again. Saris whispered urgently, Stay behind me, but Will shook his head. They came for you, for her, but they'll have to go through me first. Saris's eyes widened slightly, then softened, and for the first time, she whispered his name, Will. The sound of it carried something new, something fragile but real. Together, they stood as the shadows of the hunters filled the corridor. Lyra clung to Will's arm, her eyes shining not with fear this time, but with belief. And in that moment, Will knew his decision was final. There was no turning back. The path ahead would be filled with danger, maybe even death. But he had chosen, and his choice was stronger than fear. He had chosen to stand. The corridor outside their shelter shook with heavy boots. The hunters moved like shadows with weapons ready, their laughter echoing against the metal walls. Will gripped his knife tighter, though it felt too small against the danger coming. Saris pulled Lyra close, whispering words in her native tongue, words that sounded like protection, like prayers. The girl's silver eyes never left Will's face, filled with trust that was both strength and burden. The first hunter appeared at the entrance, tall and broad, his skin marked with scars, and his eyes burning with greed. He sneered at Saris, then at Will, his voice thick and mocking. Unclaimed no longer? A human shield, is that your game? Others laughed behind him, weapons clattering. Will stepped forward, his body tense. "They are not yours," he said, his voice steady despite the fear running through him. The hunter's grin widened, sharp teeth flashing. "Everything unclaimed is ours." Before the hunter could move, Will lunged. The knife slashed across the alien's arm, forcing a howl of pain. The laughter turned into angry roars as the other hunters surged forward. Scarce grabbed a broken pipe from the floor, swinging it with sharp precision, striking one of them across the head. Sparks flew as another slammed into the wall. Lyra screamed, but did not let go of Will's sleeve, refusing to abandon him. The narrow corridor worked in their favor. The hunters could not all attack at once, and Will used every scrap of instinct to strike, dodge, and push them back. Blood smeared across the metal floor, shouts filled the air, and the sound of chaos drew curious eyes from other refugees. Doors opened slightly, frightened faces peering out. Some jeered, some whispered, but others began to stir, the fight sparking something in their tired hearts. One of the hunters grabbed Lyra, pulling her from Scarce's arms. Her scream pierced the chaos, sharp and desperate. Will turned with fury, slamming his knife into the alien's hand, forcing him to release her. Scarce pulled her daughter back, her eyes blazing with fire. "Enough!" Scarce shouted, her voice ringing through the corridor. "She is not unclaimed, not anymore." The hunters hesitated, their leader wiping blood from his arm, his eyes narrowing at the human who dared to stand against them. "You think one man can stop us?" he snarled, but his words carried less power now. Because around them, the crowd of refugees began to gather, silent at first, then louder, voices rising. "No more," someone shouted. "Not unclaimed," another echoed. The whispers turned into chants, the sound growing stronger, filling the corridor like a storm. The hunters looked around, realizing the balance had shifted. One human standing alone was easy prey, but dozens of desperate voices rising together was risk. Slavers thrived on silence, but here, silence had broken. The leader growled, pointing at Will. "This is not finished, human. You've marked yourself, and we never forget." With that, the hunters retreated, slipping back into the shadows of the station, their anger unfinished, their hunger only delayed. Breathless, Will leaned against the wall, his knife dripping with dark blood. Scarce held Lyra close, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The girl looked up at him, tears streaking her silver-marked cheeks, but her smile was bright, full of unshaken belief. "You didn't let go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I told you. You are our family now." Will knelt, his hand brushing her shoulder gently. "I won't let them take you." Scarce looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening, her voice quiet but firm. "You have chosen a path you cannot leave now. Human, they will come again, stronger, with more, but you did not run, and for that, I am grateful." Her words carried a weight deeper than gratitude, a recognition that bonds had been forged not by tradition, but by survival. Around them, the refugees who had watched silently before now stepped closer, some offering scraps of food, others offering hiding places. The fight had sparked something long buried: hope. Together, they moved quickly, guided through hidden routes by those who now dared to help. Doors opened where once they had been shut, paths revealed that had once been denied. Will, Scarce, and Lyra slipped through the twisting corridors of the station, leaving behind the echoes of their battle. But even as they escaped, Will knew the hunter's words were true. He was marked now, no longer just a wanderer, no longer invisible. He had chosen, and with that choice came enemies who would follow him through the stars. Yet as Lyra clung to his hand and Scarce walked at his side, for the first time in years, Will felt the weight of purpose. And though danger waited in the dark, he did not fear it, because he was no longer alone. The refugee station grew quieter behind them as Will, Scarce, and Lyra moved through its hidden passages. Guided by those who had once ignored them, they slipped past guards, past traders, past the cold eyes of those who still whispered unclaimed. But now the word carried less power, because one human had stood, and the crowd had seen that courage could burn brighter than fear. Hours later, they reached the docking bay, where the air smelled of fuel and metal. Ships of every size rested there, some broken, some patched with scrap, some ready to launch into the endless dark. Refugees huddled near their chosen vessels, bargaining for seats, begging for mercy, trading what little they had for a chance to leave. Saris held Lyra's hand tightly, her eyes scanning the chaos, her shoulders tense. "They will come again," she whispered. "The hunters will not let this go." Will nodded, his jaw set. "Then we leave before they can find us." They searched until they found a colony ship preparing to depart, its hull dented but strong, its engines humming with tired power. The captain, a broad-shouldered woman with tired eyes, frowned when she saw them. "No room for wanderers," she said coldly, "unless you can pay." Will stepped forward, his voice firm. "I have no credits, but I can work, I can fight, and I don't run when danger comes." The captain studied him, then glanced at Saris and Lyra, the girl clutching Will's sleeve with stubborn trust. "Finally," she sighed, "one family space, no more." For a moment, Will hesitated, the word striking him. One family space. Saris's eyes flickered toward him, uncertain, waiting for his answer. Lyra looked between them with a smile that refused to fade, and Will said without pause, "We are one family." The captain raised a brow, but asked no questions. She waved them aboard, sealing their fate with a simple gesture. Inside the ship, the air was stale but alive with the voices of others like them. Children whispered to tired parents, old refugees clutched bags of memories, and strangers shared the silence of survival. Will, Saris, and Lyra found a corner where they could sit together. The girl curled against Will's side, her eyes heavy but her smile still bright. Saris watched quietly, her face softening in a way he had never seen before. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "Not just for us, but for many who saw you stand." Will shook his head. "I only did what was right." Saris held his gaze, her voice steady. "That is why it mattered." The ship engines rumbled louder, the vibration shaking the floor as the colony vessel prepared to leave. Through the small viewport, Will saw the stars begin to shift, the endless black stretching wide as the station fell away. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of direction, not drifting aimlessly, but moving forward with purpose. Lyra stirred, her small voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "I told you. Human, you are our family now," she whispered, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Will smiled, tired but true. "Yes, little one, I suppose I am." Saris looked away briefly, hiding the faintest smile, but her eyes shone with something more than gratitude. Something fragile, something new, perhaps hope. The stars stretched endlessly outside, carrying them toward an uncertain future. The hunters would return, danger would follow, and the road ahead would not be easy. But Will no longer faced it alone. Beside him sat a mother who had survived every storm, and a child who had carried hope into the dark. Together, they had become something stronger than fear. Not wanderers, not unclaimed, but a family. And as the colony ship disappeared into the night, leaving the broken station behind, the echoes of Lyra's first words lingered in Will's mind. "Please marry my mom, human." Words born of fear, but now carrying a promise. A promise of survival, of trust, of new beginnings. And Will knew deep inside that he had stepped into a destiny far greater than himself. A destiny that started not with battle, but with a child's fragile smile.